Welcome to the Catholic Dadcast by Rich Pintang, where we break down all things dad from a Catholic perspective. Now more than ever, we need dads to step up their game. Gentlemen, buckle up and get ready for battle. Welcome to another episode of the Catholic Dadcast. I am Rich Pintang, your host and founder. And today's episode is a fun one. We are going to be talking about raising boys to men with none other than my man, Philip Parke. Philip Parke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would imagine that there is far more experience on the other end of this than there is on front of the camera, but I will share whatever I can. And hopefully, if nothing else, it sparks some dialogue and will allow us all to have a good laugh together.
a good laugh. And it seems like usually when we get a chance to talk, Philip, it's usually a nice, healthy one. I'd like to think, but
Absolutely.
I mean, for the audience, I mean, for some of you that don't know, I mean, Philip, is very talented in what he loves in the music ministry, private music teacher, married for 20 years to Lori, and praise God for those 20 years and how amazing I'm sure that it's been when you get a chance to look back and having three boys. I thought, gosh, this is someone I would love to just chat about, and if anything, I'd love to be a fly on the wall just to see a typical day in the Parke household. But man, thank you for coming on, and again, congrats on the 20 years.
Thank
Myself, as I mentioned to you before, we this past year we reached 20 years, and man, you and I we're like a diamond in the rough. You don't
you.
see many families that have been together as long as we have.
No, it's amazing. You know, you think 20 years sounds like a long time, but now that I've been married for 20 years, I can't imagine what life would be like without my wife. So 20 years seems like such a short amount of time compared to how long I've been around. So, but it was very interesting to think that when I hit that 20-year mark with my wife, I told her, I said, I feel like we're part of a special club now. Like we've made it. Like from here on out, we've already weathered so many storms. It's like, all right, the boat's been battered. We patched up some of the holes in the boat. We've refinished it, and we're just going to keep on sailing together. And now we've got these three rugrats in tow with us, and all of the beautiful friends that come on board and go for a cruise as well. So just truly blessed. Truly blessed.
I maybe you're like me. I look at it like, man, maybe God does really have my back, because I'm very fortunate to have a good wife. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
As crazy of a roller coaster that sometimes we live, there's no one. I mean, I think you would say the same thing about Lori that I would say about Remy, that I would not want anyone else by my side to go through this roller coaster that we do in life than her.
Yeah.
So I'm very humbled that God does have my back.
And my front on both sides, and the top and the bottom.
We're fortunate men, and so we tip our hat off to the women in our lives.
No question.
And obviously without them, we wouldn't be parents either. And we have to sometimes stop to think that that's the truth. I mean, the beauty of our kids and the things that wives have to do for the betterment of the family, and dealing with us as stubborn men, as a personality, all on its own. But man, raising boys to men, I tell you,
Definitely a
man,
challenge. Definitely a challenge.
considering that you've got 15, 13, and 9, you're kind of a step ahead of me in a sense, because Angelina's 15, but my son's 10. But
Okay.
I love having conversations with with other dads that can kind of be like, you should watch out for this and you should watch out for that. But I'm
Right. The
thinking,
warnings.
I mean, think about it this way, Philip. Our audience, obviously, is Catholic dads, but it's meant to enrich the family. But
Mhm.
I'm thinking that there's two different listeners that we're gonna have, or viewers. One is the preteen dad, and then you're gonna have some that are kind of, let's say, late to the game, and they're
Mm,
trying to figure out, gosh, um, maybe I'm not really putting a lot of time into bonding with my son
mhm.
or my kids. So I'm thinking, these are the people that are probably saying, where do I start? And
Right.
but I think the whole point is, you know, each each boy, you have to learn how to understand them individually, and then
Yes, absolutely.
how do we as a family? I mean, I'm a family of four, you're a family of five. Um, it's kind of like, where do we start? So the question that comes to mind is, how do I connect with my son? And I mean, something even simpler, how do I get them to listen? Because obviously, as parents, we don't feel that happens. I don't know if that happens with your boys.
No, no, no problem there at all. Well, let me start out with going back and reiterating what you were talking about with our wives. I am incredibly blessed to have a wife who, when we first started having children, she was perfectly happy with me being the one who stayed home during the day with the boys while she went to school and taught. And then in the afternoons, we would basically swap places, and she would come home from work, and then I would go and I would teach my music students, and I would go and do my ministries at church and things like that. So I was incredibly blessed to have a wife to begin with that was okay with that situation, and she preferred it. She told me she was fine with me quitting my job during the day so that I could actually be around to be a part of raising our children. So I know not all dads have that opportunity, with the kind of jobs they might have and things of that nature. But, Lori has been a blessing from day one. And I feel like the opportunity to be such a large part of my kids' upbringing from the very get go um, has been nothing but blessings. I have often joked, I said, listen, the greatest thing about being the one who was home during the day is that at some point when the boys have to go to therapy, they're going to know who to blame. And so we can skip at least 2 years worth of therapy sessions, because I'll walk in and say, hey, it was my fault. Let's just move past that and start from there. Um, so I really do enjoy my boys. And I think you hit a really good point in the fact that it's really important to remember that they're each going to be very different. We laugh at the fact that all three of our boys have come from the same factory. They're all being, put together in the same place. But man, they are so incredibly unique individuals. Um, and I think one of the things that I always really focused on was I have to make sure that I let them find themselves, obviously within the structure of a faith-filled family. But I never wanted to be that dad where, people say, hey, are your kids taking music lessons? Are you teaching them piano? Are you teaching them guitar? Are you teaching them voice? I never wanted to be that dad who forced those kind of things upon my kids because they happened to be the things that I really liked and that I was good at. I wanted to make sure that if at any time they wanted to do music, it was there for them, but they had to come to me and ask me, so it was something that they truly desired to do. Um, and it's interesting because they all have asked at different times, in different ways, with different levels of interest, and I have to be okay with that. And I think sometimes as a dad, that's the hard thing, is being okay with something that didn't turn out the way you planned it. I think it's being a dad. We like to be the ones who can fix things. We like to be the ones that have the answers. And I think that it's really important to be able to look in the mirror and go, you know what? I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to make mistakes. and I'm going to need to make sure that I can apologize to my own kids for making those mistakes, um, and being able to admit to them, hey, you know what, I fouled up here, and I apologize for doing it. But let's see how we can make this work better the next time. My attitude needed to change. Maybe their attitude needed to change. Um, Certainly with teenagers, they get a bad rap for having attitudes coming out their ears. Um, some of them very, very well earned. Some of them, I think, it's hard to look at a teenager sometimes and remember they still are just a kid. Their brains are still developing, their bodies are still developing. They're still trying to
100%.
figure out. They're still trying to figure out everything going on with themselves. Um, so I think that's an important piece of the puzzle is to look at them and remind yourself, hey, they're still a kid.
Yeah, I hear you. And the other part of it is that, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why, for example, I did not want to name my son Rich or Richard, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes I feel like, yeah, I want the things that I love for them for them to love it also, but I also know that they are uniquely created by God and they're entrusted to me, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna mold them into what I want. That's still God's, that's still God's responsibility.
Right.
But at some point, you can kind of be like, well, Jackson, all the boys that can sing, they're the ones that get all the girls.
Well, I
Just
often will
saying.
say, I'm like, listen, if this face can end up with a woman that looks like that, it obviously had to do with music. It had nothing to do with looks.
We see it the same way,
Yes, no
but
question.
all jokes aside, it's true. You have to be able to look at each of the kids and say, here's your personality that I see, here are your interests, here's how I think I need to show you, and guide you, and teach you, for example. But man, there's something about music where people don't realize how much you can communicate. think
Absolutely.
about think about two ends of the spectrum. If you're listening to Christian music and it's uplifting and it fills you with endorphins and it lifts your spirits, or you're listening to something that's nasty, vulgar, and
Right.
unfortunately, that's that's what we see.
Yes.
And so, like, that's the hard part, is that once that's crept into the family, it's really hard to get away from it. But the art, I mean, the whole point about the boys is, how do you connect with them? And the beauty is, as a father, we can say, I am a boy, I was a boy, but it really comes down to making some kind of intentional time and understanding how does he best respond to conversation. Is it, they say that when guys are looking at each other, it's more confrontational. So you're supposed to look or have a conversation more to the side, so that they don't feel like, it's dad beating down on me again, or
Right.
it's even taking a knee and speaking to them at their level, instead of having to look at dad scold them from up above, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's a good point there in the sense that one of the places that I love being able to chat with my boys is in the car, because they are kind of a captive audience at that point. But again, like you pointed out, you're not staring at them. You're focused on the road. You're paying attention to what's going on outside, but you can still have some really good, meaningful conversations. And a lot of times they start out, with a very small topic, something kind of inconsequential, but turn into something really powerful. And obviously, you can always have music going on in the car. So that's always a plus to kind of lead in there. I'll give you a perfect example is with Jackson. Being 15 now, we're obviously talking more and more about um, adult things. He's on that curve,
And you should, you really
going
should.
closer and yeah, absolutely getting closer and closer to being, not necessarily an adult as I would label him, but as somebody who's going to start making more of his own choices. And I think one of the things that is hard for me is that that balance between, I want to raise my son to be an independent thinker. I want to raise my son to be somebody who can make choices on his own. But I also need to be comfortable with the fact that there are going to be times he'll make choices that I won't agree with, but that I need to be okay with, because he does need to be his own person. And he does need to make his own mistakes, and be able to learn from those.
The whole point is he's got to be able to go to you, though, because
Yes.
if we're constantly criticizing, who wants
He'll never
to
talk to you.
bring anything to
Right.
dad, because that's
Right.
all he does is criticize. I'm always doing something wrong. I mean,
Right.
they think about, the boys are already dealing with lack of self-confidence at school because they want to be accepted and part of something.
Right.
They don't need to feel like that at home.
Yes.
That's the way
No,
I see
absolutely. And I think that's one of the benefits, now when I look at like my 9-year-old, I've got that 6-year gap is huge when it comes to kids. I mean, as far as the development in a span of 6 years, with the 9-year-old, and even with my 13-year-old, I need to remind myself, just like you said, not to be super critical about things. I need to make sure that they have enough trust in me and enough faith in me that they can sit down and ask me questions, and they don't feel as if I'm going to jump down their throat, as if I'm really going to come after them. Now, there are going to be those times where that's a necessary part of parenting.
Well,
but I think for the most part, if I can sit and have a conversation with my kids, if they trust me enough to share, to open up, and I think especially with boys, I think many times girls might be able to express themselves better than boys can, certainly verbally. And so if I can, if I know that my 9-year-old can still want to crawl up in my lap and curl up in my lap and feel protected, that's great. But even better is when my 15-year-old walks out of the room, and comes up to me and wraps his arm around me and gives me a big hug and says something as simple as good morning, or, hey, Dad, how are you? And I know that I have already laid down that foundation when he was younger, so that he feels comfortable and confident enough to do that with me now, even as big as he is, trying to fit in. You said it, spot on with it. With high school, their confidence level is all over the place. If it's something they're really good at, confidence level obviously really high, but something as simple as making a phone call to talk to somebody. Well, Dad, can you call for me? No, you need to call them yourself. We just went through it with Jackson. He chose his confirmation sponsor. He's a freshman in high school, so he's starting a confirmation program at San Antonio. And I have to say that I'm going to start crying because he does that to me. One of the greatest honors that he bestowed upon me was asking me to be his confirmation teacher. He said, Dad, I want you to teach my confirmation class. And that's one of those moments you go, okay. You don't think about your schedule. You don't think about what other things you've got going on. You don't think about what commitments might get.
it's such an honor, man. It's such an
Absolutely.
honor.
And then he asked if I would be his confirmation sponsor, at which point I said, no. I said, because I want to make sure that I'm always going to be here. That's never going to be an issue. I want you to pick somebody else who will also be around to help you out with things, because you're going to want different perspectives. I mean, if you're getting a job done on your house, you don't go with the first guy that comes in and says, well, it's going to cost this much. Okay. No, you get a bunch of different opinions. You get some different estimates and such. And I think that, having a number of faith-filled men, especially for a young man in your life, that you can go to and ask questions about and get their opinions and get their advice and get their perspective. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that is a necessary thing. So
even on top of that story, Philip, it's when it comes to confirmation sponsors, that is supposed to be a bond. After the 2 years, that's still the person that you can go to. That's not your dad or
right.
your mom, that you can say, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? That's still an ongoing relationship. And every time I've been asked, I've been kind of taken back, whether it was like a previous person that I've coached, or it's a neighborhood child that looks at me as someone that maybe they can learn something from when it comes to our faith. But I think when it comes to like the boys, they need to be able to communicate on their own. Like you said, we we can't continue to do things for them. And what I'm thinking is, even when these boys start to recognize that that dad does want to listen, and that we are trying to intentionally see what's going on in their lives through a conversation, that we're not just nagging them to take the garbage out. We're genuinely want to know, how was your day at school? What did you do? What was first period like? And
Right.
you may not get anything 6 days out of the week, but on the seventh day, share something, you're like, man, I'm glad I wouldn't think that that's going on, but I'm glad he shared that with me. Now, is
Yeah.
it different for you having him, when you're talking about the middle child, for example,
Hmm.
do you see that, for example, Anderson has a hard, you have to approach him a little bit differently because he's not Hudson that gets away with everything because he's the youngest, and Jackson, you should know better.
Right.
Anderson's like, is it very different communicating with him and connecting?
It is in general. Anderson is autistic. And so that presents some of its own unique experiences to begin with. So chatting with him and sitting down with him is um, obviously a very unique experience. The way that he says things, the way that he intends to say things. Um, I'll give you a really good example. He has been working really hard on his socialization skills in school, but that also means that he works on them here at home. And so things like trying to understand sarcasm and then trying to be sarcastic himself, those are things that he's working on. And it obviously doesn't come as naturally to him as it does to some people, and I think that's true across the board for anybody, but especially somebody who has some of the struggles that he has. So a couple of months ago, my father-in-law passed away, and my mother-in-law was
Sorry.
over here at the house, and we were having dinner, and we were joking and laughing about some of the phrases and some of the vernacular that my father-in-law used to use, because he was a very unique individual, to say the least, a real character. And so he would never say he was cooking up steak. It was always dead cow. And he was never saying we'd have bacon. We were having dead pig. And so Anderson, God bless his soul, said, well, now that Pop Pop's gone, maybe we could just call him Dead Man. And both my wife and I kind of went, oh no, is that something that would offend my mother-in-law? And I just kind of looked at him and said, let's hold off on that. Now inside I wanted to reach across the table and rip out his larynx and say, what were you thinking? But I was calm about it. And really, I was taught a lesson that night myself, because my mother-in-law, who I think in some ways has struggled to see how the autism affects Anderson. I think she struggled with that at times. I apologized to her for what Anderson said. I said, hey, I'm really sorry. I said, I know that he didn't mean it to be offensive or hurtful or harmful in any way. And she said, no, actually, I was really happy that he was trying to involve himself in the conversation. I was really happy
Wow.
that he was being a part of the family. And I said, okay. And again, that was, as a dad, that was a learning experience for me, because I know what my mind wanted to do, but knowing that my mother-in-law had viewed it differently, I saw the growth in her, and I saw the growth in him, and I saw the beauty in the fact that she saw the growth in him. So at the same time, Anderson, he he has a real special, we have a real special bond. And I think, you have a real special bond with each one of your kids, no matter if they're male, if they're female, if they're a teenager, if they're younger. There's a special bond in some way, shape, or form, whether it's over music, or if it's over sports, or if it's over dance, or if it's over history, or whatever the case might be. And Anderson and I have a lot in common, in the sense that I spent a good portion of my days in school sitting in the back of the classroom, because I was always humming and singing and tapping. I mean, there just always seemed to be music going on in my head, in my heart. My whole body felt it. Anderson has the same thing. Yeah, he's always humming, always singing. And since the kids wear headphones now while they're doing their Zoom meetings and different things, when you have headphones on, you tend to sing or hum a little bit louder than you would normally. So we can hear him across the entire house. And it was one of those things where I know other people would get frustrated with him. And I would say, hey, buddy, you know what? I know what you're going through. Again, there's that relatability, and Jackson and I don't have it around that. And Hudson and I don't have that revolving around that, but Anderson and I do. And so it's something that I really appreciate because it makes me smile and it brings back memories of when I was a kid. And I can share that with him and we can relate to each other in the sense that he's like, Dad, there are times I don't know I'm doing it. And I said, you know what? I get it. I totally get it. I've even been at meetings as an adult. I was at a staff meeting one time and somebody looked at me and said, do you think maybe you could stop that? And I looked at them and I said, stop what? I couldn't figure out what, apparently there was music in the background. Like it was just kind of, background music and I was singing along to it. I didn't even know I was doing
To be able to show that kind of empathy is a big deal. And in most cases, as dads, we're going to just snap, and that's the unfortunate thing is that when that happens, we have to allow ourselves to recognize that we did, and then try to get that kind of that opportunity to allow the kids to forgive us, because how hard is it for us to even say sorry to our wives, for example? But one of the things that really caught my attention was you used the word sarcasm, right? And I'm the same as you. Like, we can use dry humor and we can try to keep things lively, but there are times I know that, man, I need to stop being sarcastic about certain things. And it could be the simplest thing. For example, I would be, I'd tell my son, hey, Kai, come here. You see this light? When you lift it up, put it down, it turns the light off. Can you do that when you leave the room? And it's funny, like they'll laugh about it later on, but there's certain times where I'm like, man, it's kind of condescending.
Right.
And I get that. And so like, I think that there's going to be a time where I'm like, don't you dare, say something that I said, which is the same reason why I don't like to say, because I said so, because I'm your dad,
Right.
I never want to get to that point, because it sounds too black and white. And like, how they say that, words are very sharp, and I have to be very careful with that. But when it comes to that sarcasm, we have to recognize as dads that, man, sometimes we have to be very careful, because it can be very condescending.
Oh, no question.
But some of the stuff just drives me crazy, like garbage and things like that.
A big thing there is the modeling aspect of being a dad and being a model to them about so many things. But I think obviously one of the most important things for us as dads is to model how to treat their moms. I think modeling how to treat a wife is probably one of the greatest responsibilities that we have when raising sons. And I know that I fail at that sometimes. And I'm sitting here in my dining room looking at my kitchen going, I probably could spend more time helping my wife clean the kitchen, instead of doing other things around the house and doing what I'm doing. There are probably some things that I could do a heck of a lot better job of. And that way it's not about telling your kids, hey, do the dishes. It's your kids seeing you do the dishes and going, oh, well, that's something that needs to be done, so we should do it. And I think that being that model is easily the greatest responsibility, and no question in my mind, because I think that a lot of the things that we deal with just in society in general, with the way that women are treated, I think if we as dads really focused on doing the very best job that we could of raising sons, a lot of those issues that revolve around how women are poorly treated, I can't say they would disappear completely, but I certainly think that we could have a greater impact on them with the way that women can be objectified, with the way that women can be put down, with the way, you were just saying, sometimes we're sarcastic and then we look back later and go, God, that was really kind of condescending. I think that's a really good word. I'm sarcastic with my wife. She's sarcastic with me back. And that's great. That's a great play that we have together. But I didn't realize just how much I did it until 15-year-old Jackson started using some of that same sarcasm. I'm like, don't talk to your mother like that. And it was like, oh no, I talk to your mother like that.
And that's my whole point. It's cool because you can say, hey, the Holy Family, if you think about the Holy Family as a model, you can relate to each person and how they relate to each other, how St. Joseph protected Mary, revered her, and how, for example, St. Joseph had a relationship with Jesus growing up in adolescence and such. But you're right, it is modeling, and sometimes it's understanding that, hey, this is sacrificial love, and we don't have to be told, but our kids are very capable. There's having them vacuum or clean up the table after dinner or move the dishes out. I know they're going to give us such a hard time, but it's so minuscule. But what I want to teach them is that's a way for you to show that you're thankful that we were able to have dinner, and that's your part before you go off and go do your thing.
Sure.
Let's show some thanks there. And those are the things that I think that they see. But the whole point is, it comes down to that relationship. And I would think that there's going to be a lot of dads that are thinking, okay, from a second question point of view, what if it's not working? I think there's going to be a lot of dads that are thinking, yeah, but you don't know my son, and there's two of them and there's only one of me.
Right.
But you're the adult. I say you try to use we try to do things together. And I'm not, instead of saying dad's making me do this again and they don't understand why. No, that's part of us as a family. This is all of our responsibility.
That's it right there. Family. I think that is having respect for what a family is and what a family does. I think one of the ways that kids can get real resentful towards parents is if you say, hey, I need you to take out the trash. Hey, I need you to, vacuum that room. Hey, I need you to do the dishes. But they've never seen you do it. Right? It's no different than in the workplace. You always have a lot more respect for a boss. And when you respect a boss, they become a leader, right? You don't think of them just as the boss. They're a leader. And they're a leader because you've seen them do all those things themselves, right? They always say that, a real leader won't ask somebody to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. And I think as a dad, that's important. If my kids have never seen me take out the trash and all I ever ask them to do is take out the trash, they're going to be like, well, why should we do it? He never does it. If they've never seen me do the dishes and I ask them to do the dishes, why would they think, oh, he never does it, why should I have to do it? I mean, I think that's really important. And I think that doing things together as that family. And again, it starts with those small things. Cleaning a kitchen. I mean, really, honestly, if you have to clean a kitchen by yourself after cooking for 5 people, that'll take you 45 minutes to an hour. That's a good long time, especially at the end of the day after you've already been working, after you've had other activities, you've had meetings, who knows what you've had to do. But if everybody has a little part of that job, suddenly a 10 or 15 minute family activity is just that, 10 or 15 minutes. But it's also a family activity, even if it's not something exciting. I hate doing dishes. Of all of the cleaning things in the world, dishes are my least favorite thing to do. And I know darn well that I need to do a better job.
I'm going to pray
modeling. For you. Thank you. Please do. Because with 5 people in this family, we go through a lot of dishes.
Oh, I bet, man. I bet.
And as you know, with kids, they never use the same cup all day long. It's a different cup every time they come into the kitchen. And since they're all home so much right now with the pandemic going on, oh my gosh, for the first time ever, I started going out and buying plastic cups. I started buying plastic cups because I'm like, okay, I'm buying just those little 8-ounce plastic cups. They're going to sit next to the refrigerator.
And you're going to write your name on here.
Right. I'm like when you go to parties and they've got a wine glass and they have like that special little doohickey thing you put on there, so you know it's yours. So when you set it down, it's like, oh yeah, mine's the snowman, right? Oh, it is crazy. So the amount of dishes that we're going through, it's like, oh, sweet Mother Mary, help me, please.
But that's what they'll understand it once you tell them,
Right.
you know, and they recognize, okay, maybe I need to use this one more time because I'm going to come right back down and whatever it might be. I think the whole point is that it's also we can all kind of, and again, me being a growing up in competitive sports, I always think of things as a team and
Right.
everyone having their own roles. And even though you have a certain weakness, you still try to help out with that, even though it's not your specialty. And
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, no question.
so,
And I think, we're really blessed with our faith because Saint Joseph plays such a huge role within the Holy Family.
amen.
I mean, if you stop and look at it, you've got Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, almost like the Holy Trinity here on earth, right? We've got our Trinity here on earth. And, even though Jesus was perfect, Joseph still had to be a father. I mean, just imagine how difficult it must have been to be the only imperfect person in the house growing up in those days, right? Mary, no sin. Jesus, no sin. It's like, good grief, like being a dad isn't hard enough, and now I'm living with two perfect people? That's crazy, you know? But I think that we are incredibly blessed, especially with our Catholic faith and with the respect that we have for Saint Joseph and the ability to look up to him. Think about how much impact he had on our faith by the way that he treated Mary and the way that he treated Jesus, and the fact that he was chosen by God for that role specifically. He was the protector. He was the teacher. He was the lover. He had to do so many things, and at the same time, we don't hear a single word from him coming out of the Bible, right? There's not a single word that is attributed to Joseph. So to think that he had that much impact and that nothing he ever said was recorded, I think that is another example of how just being a simple model to your family, and especially for us right now, especially to your boys, being that model is far more important than anything you could ever say to them. And I think St. Joseph is a perfect example of that.
I will second that. In fact, going through the consecration to Saint Joseph was specifically recognizing, oh my gosh, number one, he did have to protect them.
Right.
Number two, he had to teach Jesus his first prayers. He
Right.
had to teach him about carpentry and working with
Mhm.
stone. He taught him about manhood. So
Yes.
as a father, you don't think that we can't look at Saint Joseph and say, whoa, those are the virtues that I want for my son, so that when he becomes a man, he's not speaking down upon the elderly or to females. He understands
Absolutely.
respect.
Absolutely. Well, let me just share this. I'm going to put this up here. I know it's going to look, I don't know if it looks backwards to you, but it's
No.
just called the St. Joseph Gems.
Yes.
And this is Father Calloway. It's one of his books. And the thing that I like about this book is, I honestly don't have the patience to sit down and read for an hour at a time. I really wish I did, but my mind starts going of things that I need to get done, other things that are going on. I just sitting down for an hour. If I sit down in my chair and I think I've got an hour to read, I'm going to take a 55-minute nap. I mean, that's basically what's going to happen. So I love this little book because within it, it's all dated and there's just a little blurb, but it's great because it's something to really, truly get your mind thinking about what you could do better that day, how you can do it better. I love that. So like, for example, today being January 13th, it's got all sorts of little quotes about St. Joseph from different time periods and by different saints or different popes or different, theologians. I mean, it's really great, just little tiny things. But so I'll read you what today says. Joseph carried Jesus Christ first to Egypt, then to Judea, and so traced for us the path of the apostles who preached his name to the Jews and to the Gentiles. Just a simple little thing to think about. Joseph was modeling right from the very beginning of how Christianity was going to be spread. He didn't say anything, but he was the protector, right? Stole Jesus and Mary away to Egypt to protect them, right? The other thing that Joseph was, and I think sometimes gets overlooked, is he was incredibly obedient and trusting in God's plan. And let's face it, as a man, trusting somebody else's plan for us is incredibly difficult. It's like I have in my mind, no, this is what we're going to do. Well, when that changes, it's like, wait a minute. That's not what I had in mind. That's not what I had planned. I very seriously doubt that Joseph planned to marry a woman who was already pregnant. I doubt he ever planned to get a visit by an angel. I doubt that he ever planned that he was going to have to, when the baby was little, oh, let's hop on a donkey and ride to Egypt. All of those things were not in his plan. He was a simple carpenter. He's like, I'm going to live in my little town that I grew up in, and I'm going to have this carpentry business, and I'm going to take care of my people. Oh, and I'm going to get betrothed to this, beautiful woman, and we'll have a family, right? We'll have children. That was his plan. In my mind as a dad, that's your plan. You have it mapped out what you're going to do as far as business is concerned. We all do. You have it mapped out as what is my marriage going to look like? Okay, great. And then what is my family going to look like? Like those are kind of those three things that we have in our minds planned. And Joseph, out the window, like from the very beginning. And yet he still had the strength and the courage to trust that God was going to lead him where he needed to be.
Man, think about how many times that we've thought we've had everything planned out.
Right?
Absolutely. We can probably talk about the past year that we had all these plans, and this was going to be our year. And you come to the realization,
not so much.
God's in control. God's in control, well, not you.
Let me read yesterday's, because yesterday's was something that I really absolutely loved. Okay. The Catholic Church rightly honors with its highest cultus or honor and venerates with a feeling of deep reverence the illustrious patriarch, Blessed Joseph, now crowned with glory and honor in heaven, whom Almighty God, in preference to all his saints, willed on earth to be the chaste and true spouse of the Immaculate Virgin Mary, as well as the putative father of his only begotten son. And Blessed Pope Pius the Ninth was the one who stated that. And I think something that really, really hit me when I read that, as I looked at it, it says that he was chosen to be the chaste and true spouse of the Immaculate Virgin Mary. That was what he was chosen to do first, right? And I think that illustrates, again, how important it is to be such a great model of a husband first, right? Jesus came second, Mary came first. And I think that it's important for us. I mean, even if you go through scripture, it talks about how important it is for us to be that husband, right? That's really the main priority, because if you're a really good husband, most likely that will roll over into being a good father. And again, modeling being that good husband will mean that the next generation, your sons, will be good husbands. They will look for the right things when they are looking to date. They will look for the right things when they are, proposing. They'll look for the right things in a woman. But most importantly, I think they're going to try to be the right things in a marriage, right? They're not going to be looking at their wife to fix this or to change this. No. If they go into a marriage and their wife thinks that she needs to change a bunch of things about them, then, that's not a great way to start things. Because let's face it.
Book, Philip, for a lot of non-readers, it's great because it gives you so much power in just one statement each day.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's other books, for example, that will go more into depth about specifically the litany of Saint Joseph,
Right.
and what made me want to consecrate myself to Saint Joseph this at the end of last year was because I am a Richard Joseph, born on Saint Joseph's Day.
Are
I
you
was like,
really?
man, how much more could it me going all this time and not saying, maybe I need to know about it more, and
Right.
then to have Pope Francis announced the year of Saint Joseph.
Year
I
of
was
Saint
like,
Joseph.
whoa,
Yeah,
this is like this is too good to be true, and so I felt like I was in a
absolutely.
good place. But to your point, it's the lineage. If you
Right.
think about it, we have to be models for our sons about what it is to be a man, what it is to be a father, and we can't give what we don't have. So
Right.
if we can't be children of God and look to God the Father as our role model, and even how Saint Joseph was a role model because of what he had to do for the Holy Family, you know, then it's on us to find the truth out and to
Right.
be better servants of God through the Word and through books like that.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it doesn't happen on its own, and
No. No. No.
that's why the fact is, even if things aren't working out, you still have to figure out ways to discipline, address disobedience, but do it in a loving way,
Right.
in a way that it teaches them, and you see the grace kind of exchange in those situations. But one of the things that it reminds me of is trying to rediscover what it was like in boyhood when we
Right.
were kids. And when you
Right.
can do that, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes. Obviously, today's day and age is very different.
Oh
But
yeah.
the fact is, you could either be an engaged father or you can be an absent father that's not present, that's watching 4 hours of ESPN at the bar, working
Right.
overtime, and here's your son trying to find something to do elsewhere. And
Right.
that's where you wonder why they're not engaged,
Mm-hmm.
because we haven't taken time to have some sort of bond. And I was thinking about my notes for today, and I was thinking, yeah, what are some of the things that I can do as dads? We have to ask ourselves that.
Right.
What Where we're very fortunate, Philip, is we have an opportunity that we can do things as a family
Right.
through the church and through church activities.
Absolutely.
But that's where we get
Absolutely.
to know our son.
Right. Well, and I think what's been, again, I have been incredibly blessed from the get go, in that I have always been. I started working for the church when I was 19. I was the assistant youth minister at San Antonio at 20. And I've been, and the assistant choir director at 19. So, I was involved. And I think I look back now and I go, you know what? That was how God planted the seeds for me to find the wife that I found. I have known Lori since I was 10. I sang in the All American Boys Chorus with both of her brothers. So we've known each other for 35 years. We didn't start dating until we were in our 20s. Um, but I look at it like a real blessing, because when we started dating, she was born and raised Methodist. She converted to Catholicism before we got married. And she told me flat out, one of the reasons that she did is because I told her it wasn't a big deal to me that she wasn't Catholic, but it was going to be a big deal that we would go to church as a family and that we would raise our children in the Catholic faith, because it was something that was deeply important to me. And if that was going to be a problem, then that was going to be a problem and something we would have to talk about. And the very next day, she went and signed up for the RCIA program at San Antonio. And when I talked to her about it later, I said, listen, I want to make sure you're doing this for you and that you're not doing it for me. And that to me is not faith. The faith has to be something you do for yourself. And she said, Philip, you have shown me, right? You have modeled to me these years that we've been dating, that your faith is important to you. You don't miss Sunday Mass. You're heavily involved, obviously, in youth ministry. She said, your faith is something that drives you. She said, and that's what I was looking for in a husband. And she said, that's how I want to raise our family. I want us to be able to go to church together. I want us to do for our faith to grow together, and that we are journeying together. And so the fact that, raising young men in the Catholic faith is not an easy thing. Okay, it's not an easy thing at all. I mean, I often joke that, Jesus is God, and when he came to earth, there are two things that he didn't try: marriage and parenthood. Okay, he never got married and he never had kids. So even if God himself wasn't willing to try them while he was here, then I think obviously they're kind of difficult. And all kidding aside, they are. And they are going to be difficult no matter what phase you are in your marriage, what phase you are in your role as a parent. I often laugh when I start thinking about what kind of grandparent I'm going to be, and I just think, am I going to be that grandparent where the kids walk in and I do everything to them so they go back and do them to their own moms and dads? Or am I going to be that one who thinks, all right, grandpa needs to behave himself, So I think that, doing things within our faith, it has really helped me with raising my boys, because they see that it's important to me. And again, I'm modeling it. And it's not just a job. Yes, I worked for the church doing music, but I've also been involved in prison ministry. And I've also been involved in homeless ministries. And I've been involved in building homes down in Tijuana through Corazon. I mean,
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually do want to touch on those particular experiences.